Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON. This is America's Heroes Group. It is September 7th, 2019. I'm Cliff Kelly, the host here. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Manny Corazari. And we are pleased to continue with a show with some great information for you. On our live line, we have JoNel Aleccia. Am I pronouncing it okay?
Yes, that's right.
Okay,
Hi.
fine.
Yeah, JoNel Aleccia. I'm with Kaiser Health News.
Okay.
Nice to be here.
And thank you so much. She's in Portland, Oregon, a based senior correspondent on the KHN Enterprise and Investigations team, focusing on the serious illness, aging, and end-of-life issues. She has been a health reporter for more than a decade at sites including MSNBC.com, NBCNews.com, and the Seattle Times. And we are so pleased to have you. And, of course, you talked to us about this situation that happened before. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I wrote a story a while ago about the family of a young Navy nurse, Mawani Daniel, who had died in 2014 when she was having a baby at a Navy hospital in Washington State. And her husband, she died within hours of her daughter being born, and her husband didn't know what had happened because it was so sudden. She was healthy, and the baby was healthy, and she ended up having massive postpartum hemorrhaging. And he was left with no answers. But her husband found out that he wasn't allowed to get any answers about why his wife died because he was barred from suing the federal government because she was an active duty military member at the time of her death. And so he brought a lawsuit trying to sue the government and get answers about her death, and still has not been able to. The case his lawyer petitioned the Supreme Court earlier this spring to consider the case, and in May, the court declined to hear the case. And so Walter Daniel, her husband, has really been left without answers. And his point of view has always been that he wanted to fight for the right of other military members to be able to sue in cases of medical malpractice, just as civilian families can.
We are so pleased to have with us, and thank you so much for writing that, too. Attorney Steve Seidman is in our studio. He's a sponsor of America's Heroes Group and an advisory board member, and also a wonderful counselor who helps a lot of people, and particularly veterans. Steve, help us with this.
Yes, and it's really a tragic situation. If we go back to the Daniels case, for instance, and Ms. Alicia's story, which was excellent and broke this.
Right.
It's interesting in that Justice Clarence Thomas, in that particular decision, wrote a dissent. This is not a man who is, proactive. He's not a man who is particularly liberal. And here is what his dissent said. When the majority refused to take the petition for certiorari, which is a review petition,
right,
for Mr. Daniels to be heard by the Supreme Court. Every other court begrudgingly found for the government because of the Feres Doctrine. Mm-hmm. And what Justice Thomas wrote was, Feres was wrongly decided and heartily deserves the widespread, almost universal criticism it has received. Such unfortunate repercussions, denial of relief to military personnel, and distortions of other areas of law to compensate will continue to ripple through our jurisprudence as long as the court refuses to reconsider Feres. This is from Justice Thomas.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day.
And if I'm not mistaken, in that particular commentary, I believe Justice Ginsburg sided with Justice Thomas.
I was wondering what the count was.
Yeah, Justice Ginsburg said she would have granted the petition, and so you have these two justices who aren't normally on the same page,
right,
thinking the court should have actually considered this.
And it is amazing because you very seldom ever see those two together. And if we go back to the Feres Doctrine and where we've evolved over the years, it started, a 2.5-foot long towel was left inside a man for 8 months, a soldier burned alive in his barracks due to a defective heating plant, a serviceman killed by negligent surgeon. All those cases, they all have in common that they were the cases before the Supreme Court in 1950, when the Supreme Court ruled that the U.S. government could not be sued by members of the armed forces for injuries they suffer incidental to their service. That's now known as the Feres Doctrine. And I must tell you, this principle has evolved, and tens of thousands of active duty military service, killed, injured by others, have been denied, even carelessness, sometimes intentional. And it's been applied, this Feres Doctrine, to bar recovery in cases involving training mishaps, on-base car accidents, and even in cases involving sexual assault. Wow. So let's go back into a couple of other ridiculous situations where the Feres Doctrine was held to apply.
Let me just say this, Consular. Joining us also on our live line, he's on the way here, I believe, but Congressman Danny K. Davis is with us. Congressman, thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Okay. Cliff, how are you doing?
All right. Are you on the way, I hope?
Well, I really kind of got confused because I was listening, and I said, well, I guess they came on early.
Well, listen, we have something for you. That's the reason I'm asking specifically. But just hang on, okay?
All right.
Yeah, you've heard both of our great folks here, the Consular Seidman, and of course what JoNel, Aleccia, has done, giving us this great information. What do you have an opinion on this whole thing, the Feres Act?
I do.
Yes, I figured you did.
And the reason I do, there are different thinkers, and there are people who think a certain way. And I think that people should always have the greatest opportunities to express themselves. And if decisions are made contrary to what they think and what they feel and what their rights ought to be, that they still should have the right to do it. and therefore, I would be, in favor of the individual having as much opportunity for review as they can get. And if they disagree with the court, or if they disagree with the military, at least have the opportunity to express by suing, which is a legal way of expressing your position. And then if the next level says, no, you're wrong, this isn't what's going to happen.
Well,
that's all right. You still have the opportunity.
You sure? Okay. Yeah,
Congressman Steve Seidman, it's nice to talk to you. As I understood it, in August of this year, there was the National Defense Authorization Act, and actually in that act, inside of that act, there was a provision that could overturn part of the Feres Act, and that's the legal precedent that we're faced with here, Congressman. And that is the act that prevents malpractice cases, no matter how ridiculous and how terrible the care was. And the provision in the National Defense Authorization Act, as I understood it just a month ago, was that the provision would allow those serving in the military to bring medical malpractice lawsuits, but it would keep a bar on negligence lawsuits in place. And I don't know where that stands right now, but in my opinion, changing the Feres Act is going to take an act of Congress. We've heard this before. We need an act of Congress. That's the only way the Supreme Court has made it clear that 50 years ago, for whatever reason, the Supreme Court decided that the Feres Doctrine should apply. The only way it's going to be changed is an act of Congress. And I want to say it's going to be a game changer if that happens. People in the military who give their lives and put themselves every day on the line do not have the same rights that somebody on the street, such as I do, who has never served. And I think that's not proper. And we saw that with Ms. Alicia's investigative piece on the Daniels situation. This individual still does not have answers. So I would give of myself whatever you need, but I think that this is afoot. And I guess the question I have to ask, if you know, is where are we at with changing, and where are we at with the National Defense Authorization Act and the provision?
Well, I would think that the likelihood, and of course, issues would have to get raised and raised at a sufficient level. I think I'll try and do a bit of research.
Yeah, well, maybe I can help here for a minute. It sounds like the bill proposed by Jackie Spear in California was part of the House version, the House 2020 National Defense Authorization Act, and that passed. So it was included in the House version. I know there were Republican co-sponsors. I know the Senate version has been approved, and now I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Congressman, but I think a conference committee needs to iron out the differences between the two versions. So I guess what's in question is whether it's still an option, and whether you're optimistic that the House version, this particular provision in the House version, will get to go forward.
I think if there is enough awareness raised and enough conversation about it and effort put forth, it would definitely be on the table.
So can I interrupt, Congressman? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but how do we do that as a lobbying body? Please tell us how we do it. I'd like to help, but
one, you could contact as many individual members in both the House and the Senate as possible, or as you would care to do so. Members have a way of just going to the floor, making 1-minute speeches and 5-minute speeches just to talk about anything that they want to raise and just get in the public's way. And then members even get an opportunity to take out sometimes a 30-minute block of time, or perhaps a whole hour, if there's a group of members who'd like to get 30 minutes or an hour, and just go to the floor and talk about it for that whole length of time, just raising the issue. And then, of course, there's the whole business of writing letters and communicating to every kind of outlet that there is. Of course, this is obviously a great outlet right now. And maybe even citizens who are listening, or people who are listening, veterans who are listening, individual veterans, as well as veterans groups like the VFWs and the American Legion Post, and can do the same thing. Get enough information out in the public way, and the conference committee would probably make absolutely certain to have it on the agenda when the conference committee meets.
Is that coming up real soon? I haven't been able to see the schedule for that. Can you tell us? Maybe people would.
No,
would
we've been away. I've actually been away for 6 weeks, and we're just going back. But we could really check when we go back Monday.
Congressman, I'm a political novice. It's something that in all my years I've never been involved in. Is there any way that I could maybe contact your staff? I'll be happy to take the lead with as many people that want to. But unless we get an organized approach to this, I feel like it's everything else. There's got to be enough pushback and push. Otherwise, nothing will happen. So if I could maybe get some information and talk to somebody in your office.
I agree. If you call Dr. Caleb Gilchrist in my office Monday, and the number there is 202-225-5006.
Thank you.
That's
and
great.
So Caleb will take that, and then when I get there, we'll get together and put our heads together and see how we can begin to move it.
That sounds great. That
really
does.
Because this is just so ridiculous. And Miss Aleccia, if she hadn't come up with this, you ought to be congratulated again, because there are so many people who knew nothing about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'll try to get people who own armed services. I'm not on armed services.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, unfortunately, I've never been. But you can only be in where you can be.
Yeah.
And
You're right.
Congressman, I just got to cite one other instance of how ridiculous this is. There was a guy, Dean Witt. He was an Air Force Staff Sergeant. He was mistakenly transferred after a routine surgery for appendicitis to a children's unit, administered a lethal dose of fentanyl, then left with an improperly inserted breathing tube. Of course, he suffered severe brain damage and later died. Of course, he was precluded by the Feres Act. And now is the time to act, I think, Congressman, and anything I can do, and I'd be happy to.
And the bad thing about that also, Consul, is we all know doctors don't have to be real careful, do they?
No, there's no disincentive.
Exactly.
We're criticized a lot for medical negligence cases when we bring them.
Yeah.
However, in my 38 years of practice, I can tell you, I believe it's helped the safety of private medical care because of the lack of accountability. Here we have the lack of accountability.
Right. Totally.
It's the
and
antithesis.
And knowingly.
And
Yes.
it's
That's
the
for sure.
antithesis of what should happen.
Right.
Well, we will certainly take it and see how we can help get it raised, and hopefully get it raised to a level high enough to assure that the Joint Committee is looking at it.
We certainly appreciate that, Congressman. And, of course, you're on our advisory board and so forth, so just make sure you tell everybody the America's Heroes group is supporting you on this, okay? And
all right.
now we got
Yeah,
one other
indeed.
thing.
Is he still coming in?
Huh?
Is he still coming to the studio?
Are you still coming in or not?
I think I've got my schedule confused, so I'm kind of
Okay.
not having the opportunity to do so.
Okay. The reason for it, he can't make it. We had something here for you. You know what it is, don't you? A birthday cake.
Well, I appreciate that so much, Cliff, and all.
We're trying to surprise you.
Hold on a minute.
And I've had a wonderful. My birthday was actually yesterday,
Uh-huh.
and I've had so many wonderful experiences and things from individuals that I've been a surrogate father to, a surrogate, whatever you want to call it, people that you've forgotten, and kids who've called me from all over the country and all over the world.
My executive producer, Glenda Smith, is very upset because she made sure to have. She told me, listen, when the congressman comes in, whatever you're talking about, cut it off, because we're going to bring in his cake, and she's
Yeah, I messed that up, and I've been out, doing what you do, campaigning and getting signatures, and got 2 or 3 other things that I've just got to do. But I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate the discussion, because I've been listening in my car to the show, and that's what threw me off.
okay.
I know 4 o'clock, but I said that's the 45, and so. But at any rate, it's a great effort, and I will tune up on Monday.
Great.
And I want to thank your guests for really bringing it to our attention, because that's how you make things happen.
That's true.
In this country. If somebody hears about it, somebody learns about something they had not paid much attention to, or they may not have known about it, and an activated citizenry is the only safeguard that we have for democracy. And so we'll dig into it.
Thank you so much,
see what we can
Congressman.
do.
Appreciate you.
Okay.
All right, and again, happy birthday to you. Okay.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. JoNel, Aleccia, you have done such a great service, because we know so much more about this because of you. And
thanks so much.
thank you, and we'll be following up. Attorney Steve Seidman, of course, is really on top of this, and the congressman gave him the name of the person that he'll be calling, Dr. Caleb Gilchrist. And
I'll do that Monday.
I know you will.
I will.
All right.
Great.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much for
Thanks so
having
much.
me.
Yeah.
Have a nice evening.
Pleasure. You too now.
Sure.
All right.